Humanity has always believed in its supremacy. For centuries, we've looked to the stars with wonder and ambition, confident that our ingenuity and resilience made us the masters of the earth, the architects of technology, the shepherds of progress. But in our pride, we forgot one essential truth. The universe is vast, and we are not alone. The first hint came as a signal. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo across the void of space. Scientists, journalists, and politicians hailed it as the most significant discovery in human history. Mars, once thought to be a barren wasteland, had spoken. For days, the world held its breath, captivated by the tantalizing possibility of first contact. What would they be like? What could we learn from them? The hopes of billions rested on those questions. And then the first cylinder fell. It landed in the Nevada desert with a deafening crash, shaking the ground for miles. People flocked to the site, eager to witness history in the making. Smartphones captured every angle, news helicopters buzzed overhead, and social media exploded with speculation. The metallic object was sleek and alien, its surface pulsing with a faint, otherworldly light. Scientists speculated about its origin, politicians debated its implications, and humanity's collective imagination ran wild. But the wonder quickly turned to horror. The cylinder opened, releasing a hiss that sounded like the exhalation of something ancient. What emerged defied comprehension. The creature, if it could even be called that, was a biomechanical hybrid of flesh and machine, a grotesque amalgamation of sinew and steel. Its eyes were massive and unblinking, pools of black that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its oily skin glistened under the desert sun, and its lipless mouth emitted a sound that was not a noise but a vibration, something that reverberated deep in the chest and unsettled the mind. Panic erupted. People screamed and ran as the creature scanned its surroundings with cold, predatory intelligence. Soldiers opened fire, but the bullets ricocheted harmlessly off a shimmering energy field that enveloped the alien. And then came the beam, a searing, blinding light that swept across the desert, vaporizing everything in its path. Tanks melted, concrete turned to ash. Human lives were extinguished in an instant. The Martians had arrived. Across the globe, more cylinders fell. They landed in cities, forests, and oceans, each one unleashing a similar horror. The Martians did not come to negotiate. They did not come to learn. They came to conquer. Their technology was centuries, perhaps millennia, ahead of ours. Biomechanical war machines, armed with heat rays and surrounded by impenetrable shields, marched across the earth, reducing entire cities to rubble. Governments crumbled under the weight of the assault. Communication networks failed, and once thriving metropolises became graveyards. For the first time in history, humanity faced an enemy it could not outsmart or overpower. The illusion of our dominance shattered as quickly as the cities they destroyed. The Martians seemed unstoppable, their actions cold and calculated, as if they had done this before, and perhaps they had. Yet, in the face of annihilation, humanity refused to surrender. Amidst the ruins of the world, a resistance began to form. Ordinary people, farmers, mechanics, teachers, and scientists took up arms. They scavenged what they could, repurposing the remains of their old lives into tools of survival. In secret bunkers and hidden enclaves, they planned, sharing knowledge and pooling their resources. The fight was uneven, almost laughable, but the human spirit, battered though it was, burned brighter than ever. And there was hope. As the resistance studied the Martians, they uncovered fragments of their technology, hints of weaknesses buried within their seemingly invincible machines. It became clear that the Martians were not gods. They were beings, and like all beings, they had flaws. But the greatest revelation came not from their technology, but from their history. Buried deep within the remains of a fallen Martian spire, the resistance discovered a message. It was encrypted, its language alien, but its meaning was unmistakable. The Martians were not conquerors by choice. They were survivors of a dying world, a civilization that had consumed its resources and poisoned its climate. Their invasion of Earth was not an act of violence, but of desperation. They had come here because they had nowhere else to go. This knowledge changed everything. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a reflection of humanity's own potential future. Would we learn from their mistakes, or would we follow the same path of destruction and desperation? As the resistance fought back, these questions loomed large, shaping every decision they made. This is the story of the war that redefined humanity. A story of terror, resilience, and the fragile line between survival and extinction. It is a story of humanity's greatest failure and its greatest triumph, of the darkest moments when all seemed lost and the brightest sparks of hope that refused to die. As the earth burned and the Martians faltered, one truth became clear. This was more than a fight for survival. This was a fight for redemption, for both worlds. The question was not whether humanity could defeat the Martians. The question was whether humanity could rise above its own nature and prove itself worthy of the world it sought to save. The battle for Earth had begun, and the outcome would shape the future of two civilizations. Chapter 1. Echoes from the red abyss. It all started with a signal. A single rhythmic pulse beamed across the void of space, intercepted by Earth's deep space network. At first, no one believed it. After all, humanity had been searching for intelligent life for centuries and had found nothing but static. Yet here it was, a pattern, deliberate and unmistakable, originating from the surface of Mars. In the heart of the Global Space Agency's command center, screens flickered with data as scientists scrambled to decode the signal. Dr. Alina Vargas, a leading astrobiologist, stood at the helm of the chaos. Her dark eyes darted between monitors, her voice steady but urgent. Confirm the source, she ordered. I want triangulation completed in the next 5 minutes. The protagonist, a journalist for the global news outlet Terrapulse, had been assigned to cover what initially seemed like another false alarm. They leaned against the glass partition of the observation deck, notebook in hand, watching the frenetic energy below. The journalist had seen plenty of sensationalized discoveries come and go. Something about this moment felt different. The air was electric with both fear and excitement. Do you think it's real? A junior technician whispered to a colleague nearby. If it's not, it's the most elaborate hoax in history of humanity. Hours turned into days, and the signal persisted. It pulsed with a rhythmic precision that defied natural phenomena. Linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists worked around the clock to interpret its meaning. Finally, a breakthrough came. The signal wasn't a message. It was a map. A set of coordinates pointing to specific locations on Earth. The world watched as the first meteor fell. It wasn't a meteor, of course. It was something far more sinister. The object landed in the Nevada desert. Its descent captured by hundreds of smartphones and live-streamed to billions. It didn't explode on impact. Instead, it struck the ground with a deep, resonant thud, sending a shockwave across the arid landscape. People flocked to the site, eager to see the phenomenon up close. The military cordoned off the area, but not before images of the object leaked online. A sleek, cylindrical pod made of an unknown alloy, its surface pulsing with a faint, eerie light. The journalist, ever the opportunist, managed to secure a spot on the media perimeter. They described the scene in vivid detail for their audience. The way the sun glinted off the pod's metallic surface, the low hum that seemed to emanate from within, the tension in the air as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Then it opened. The first Martian emerged, and humanity's perception of the universe shattered. It was nothing like the little green men of old science fiction. This creature was a nightmare made flesh, a towering biomechanical hybrid with oily brown skin stretched taut over an exoskeletal frame. Its massive, lidless eyes glowed a sickly yellow, scanning its surroundings with a cold, predatory intelligence. A lifeless, V-shaped mouth emitted a sound that was less a noise and more vibration that rattled bones and unsettled minds. The crowd panicked. Screams filled the air as people scrambled to flee. The military opened fire, but the Martian raised a spirally, claw-like appendage, and an energy field shimmered into existence, deflecting the bullets harmlessly. Then came the heat ray, a blinding, searing beam of light that reduced everything it touched to ash. Vehicles melted, concrete vaporized. Human lives ended in an instant. The journalists barely escaped with their life, diving into a ditch as the heat rays swept across the landscape. When the carnage ended, they rose shakily to their still a long way off. For now, humanity could do little but run, hide, and bear witness to the beginning of the end. Chapter 2. The Descent of Fire. The Martian pods continue to fall, each landing more calculated than the last. From the deserts of Nevada to the icy tundras of Siberia, the invaders spared no region. The protagonist's voice, growing wearier with each passing day, captured the chaos as humanity's once thriving cities turned into battlegrounds. It wasn't just the sheer destruction that terrified people. It was the methodical precision of it all. The Martians didn't annihilate aimlessly. They targeted critical infrastructure first: communication hubs, power grids, and transportation networks. In a matter of days, Earth was plunged into a digital dark age. The protagonist's connection to Terrapulse became sporadic, and their once constant updates now came in bursts of fragmented text, hurriedly typed out in fleeting moments of safety. In the early hours of the Martian assault, there was still a sense of denial among Earth's leaders. Governments assured their citizens that the invaders could be repelled, that humanity's advanced weaponry would triumph. But the first coordinated military strike against the Martians was a disaster. Armies mobilized to intercept the pod and landed outside Egypt. Drone footage showed an impressive array of tanks, aircraft, and missile launchers surrounding the alien structure. The world held its breath. Then the heat waves began. The Martians had anticipated every move. Their energy shields deflected missiles, their biomechanical limbs swatted drones from the sky, and their heat rays cut through steel and flesh and blood. Within minutes, the battlefield was littered with smoking wreckage. The survivors, those who weren't vaporized, fled in terror. The footage ended abruptly, the drones recording it obliterated in a flash of light. The protagonist, now on the move with a group of refugees, described the haunting silence that followed the end of time. It wasn't just the loss of life, it was the loss of hope. For the first time, humanity faced an enemy we couldn't understand, let alone defeat. As the Martians' domination spread, the Earth itself seemed to revolt. The landing sites of the pods became centers of environmental collapse. The air grew heavy with an acrid smell. The ground turned gray and lifeless, and plants withered within hours of exposure to Martian machinery. Rivers ran dry, and animals fled or perished, their habitats poisoned by the invaders' presence. Cities became uninhabitable wastelands, forcing survivors into the wilderness. The protagonist's journey took them to what remained of a small town in the Midwest. Once a thriving farming community, it was now little more than a ghost town, its fields scorched and its streets eerily silent. Among the rubble, they met a group of resistance fighters, ordinary people who had taken up arms in a desperate bid to fight back. Farmers wielded shotguns, mechanics repurposed tools into crude weapons, and teenagers carried makeshift explosives in their backpacks. "We're not going down without a fight," said one of the leaders, a grizzled man named Carter. His voice was hoarse, his eyes sunken but determined. "They're strong, but they're not invincible. We just need to figure out how to crack their armor." The protagonist joined the group, documenting their efforts to understand the Martians' technology. They worked tirelessly, salvaging materials from abandoned buildings and dissecting fragments of destroyed Martian machinery. It wasn't much, but it was something, a flicker of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. The group's first real encounter with the Martians came one fateful night. A scout spotted a lone biomechanical warrior patrolling the outskirts of the town. The resistance fighters devised a plan. They would lure it into an ambush, hoping to disable it and study its inner workings. Armed with makeshift explosives and an old hunting rifle, they waited in tense silence as the Martian approached. The attack was both a success and a tragedy. The resistance managed to disable the Martian, its mechanical limbs sparking and convulsing as it crumpled to the ground. But the cost was high. The heat ray claimed 3 lives, including Carter's. The survivors, bloody and shaken, dragged the fallen Martian back to their hideout, determined to make sense of the alien technology. The protagonist's notes from that night were organic core encased in shimmering metallic veins. Scientists among the group, former engineers, biologists, and a few curious amateurs, leaned in to study the pulsating structure. For the first time since the invasion began, the group had a chance to uncover what made the Martians so terrifyingly effective. "It's not just technology," murmured Dr. Harper, a biologist who had once worked for a leading pharmaceutical company. She held up a fragment of the alien's core, its surface glistening like liquid silver. It's alive. It's some kind of hybrid between a neural system and an adaptive AI." The protagonists hovered nearby, their notebook in hand. "What does that mean for us?" they asked, their voice heavy with concern. Dr. Harper hesitated, her brow furrowing. "It means they're not individuals, they're parts of a greater whole, a hive mind." The implications hit the group like a gut punch. The Martians weren't just coordinated, they were connected. Every action, every attack, every defense, it was all part of a singular collective intelligence. The realization made their task seem even more impossible. How do you fight an enemy that can think, act as one, adapting instantly to any strategy? As the group worked to understand the alien's core, a new challenge emerged. The organic material began to degrade rapidly, its pulsating light dimming. Dr. Harper and her team scrambled to preserve it, but the technology was beyond their understanding. They managed to isolate a small fragment and placed it in a sealed container, hoping it might yield answers later. The rest dissolved into a gray, viscous sludge, leaving behind only a metallic shell. The protagonist's account from that day was filled with a mix of awe and dread. "They're not just machines," they wrote. "There's something entirely new. A fusion of biology and technology that defies everything we know about life. And they're smarter than us, faster than us, better than us. How do we even begin to help them?" That evening, as the group departed, the hideout's lone window lit. It was a rare and precious link to the outside world, used sparingly to conserve power and avoid detection. The voice on the other end was faint but urgent. "This is Resistance Command," it said. "We have confirmed reports of coordinated Martian activity across all major zones. They're building something. Large-scale structures. We need intel. If you're receiving this, report any sightings immediately." The group exchanged uneasy glances. What could the Martians be building? And more importantly, why? The protagonist volunteered to lead a scouting mission. Accompanied by two others, they ventured beyond the relative safety of the town, navigating the ruined landscape under the cover of night. The journey was harrowing. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the distant glow of Martian structures cast an eerie light on the horizon. After hours of cautious travel, they reached the edge of a Martian construction site. What they saw defied comprehension. Towering spires of organic metal hybrids rose into the sky, their surfaces rippling as if alive. Martian drones swarmed around the structures, emitting a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. At the base of the spires, massive, pulsating pods were being cultivated, each one the size of a small building. "What are they doing?" one of the scouts whispered, their voice barely audible. The protagonist raised a pair of binoculars, scanning the scene. Their gaze settled on a group of human captives, herded by biomechanical warriors toward one of the pods. The captives' faces were pale, their movements sluggish, as if they were in a trance. The protagonist's stomach turned as the pod's surface split open, revealing a writhing mass resistance began to splinter under the overwhelming force of the Martian onslaught. Entire nations fell in a matter of days, their cities reduced to smoldering ruins or overtaken by the strange biomechanical spires that now dotted the Earth's surface. Governments scrambled to maintain order, but communication lines were severed, and military operations failed at every turn. The protagonist's journal entries during this time took on a somber tone. Traveling with the resistance group, they witnessed firsthand the collapse of human civilization. They described the haunting emptiness of once bustling cities, now eerily silent save for the occasional distant hum of Martian drones. In North America, the remnants of the federal government had retreated to underground bunkers. Broadcasts from surviving leaders were few and far between, their messages desperate pleas for unity and hope. But unity was a fleeting concept in the face of such devastation. Factions began to form, each with its own agenda. Some sought to fight, others to hide, and a few even advocated surrender, believing cooperation with the Martians might offer a chance at survival. The resistance group decided to head south, hoping to find refuge in the sprawling mountain ranges where the Martians seemed less active. The journey was perilous, with Martian patrols scanning the landscape for survivors. The group traveled at night, their movements shrouded in darkness, relying on their knowledge of the terrain to avoid detection. One night, as they passed through the outskirts of what had once been Atlanta, the group encountered another band of survivors. At first, tensions ran high. The two groups eyed each other warily, weapons drawn. But when it became clear that neither posed a threat, they decided to share resources and information. From these new allies, the protagonist learned of the situation overseas. Europe was in chaos. The United Kingdom had fallen silent, its major cities enveloped by Martian fog. In France and Germany, scattered resistance efforts were underway, but without coordination, they were doomed to fail. Asia fared no better. China's advanced technology had provided a key to the group, but their defenses were ultimately blown up by the Martians' relentless capability. Reports from Africa and South America were scarce. The few messages that got through painted a grim picture of devastation and despair. Despite the dire circumstances, the group pressed on, driven by a mixture of determination and desperation. Along the way, they encountered signs of humanity's resilience. In a small, hidden valley, they discovered a community of survivors who had managed to cultivate food and establish a semblance of normalcy. The sight was a rare moment of hope for the protagonist, who documented the encounter in vivid detail. Even in the face of extinction, they wrote, humanity finds a way to endure. These people, with nothing but the bare essentials, have carved out a life for themselves in the shadow of the Martians. It's a testament to our spirit, but it's also a stark reminder of how far we've fallen. The group didn't stay long, knowing the Martians' reach would eventually extend even to this remote haven. As they continued their journey, they began to notice a disturbing pattern. The Martian spires were no longer isolated structures. They were connecting, forming a vast, sprawling network that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The ground near the spires had turned black and spongy, as if the Earth itself was being consumed and transformed. Dr. Harper, ever the scientist, studied the phenomenon with a mix of fascination and horror. They're terraforming, she concluded, but it's more than that. They're not just changing the planet, they're integrating it into their biology. Earth is becoming an extension of their hive mind. The weight of this revelation hung heavy over the group. If the Martians succeeded, it wouldn't just mean the end of humanity. It would mean the end of Earth as they knew it. Every plant, every animal, every inch of soil would be assimilated into the Martian network. The protagonist's entries from this period reflected a growing sense of urgency. We're running out of time, they wrote. Every day, carefully, weaving through dense forests and rocky terrain, always aware of the threats that scourge the skies. The protagonist's entries from this time spoke of a knowing fear that hung over them like a storm cloud. Each step felt like it could be their last. "We're so close," the protagonist wrote, "but every movement forward feels like we're walking a tightrope over an abyss. One wrong step, and we're done for." The Martian facility was a fortress unlike anything they had encountered before. Its walls shimmered with an iridescent sheen, pulsating faintly as if alive. The drones patrolling the area moved with a chilling precision, their sleek forms cutting through the air silently. The resistance crew observed from a safe distance, mapping out patrol routes and searching for any weaknesses in the facility's defenses. Dr. Harper took charge of the planning. She was meticulous, using every scrap of knowledge they had gathered about Martian technology to devise a strategy. The group's goal was simple but daunting: infiltrate the facility, gather as much intelligence as possible, and if the opportunity arose, sabotage its operations. The group waited until nightfall to make the move. Armed with scavenged weapons and homemade explosives, they crept toward the facility under the cover of darkness. The protagonist's heart pounded in their chest as they approached the outer perimeter. Every sound, the snapping twig, the rustle of leaves, felt deafening in the silence. The first obstacle was a patrol drone hovering near the entrance. One of the group members, a former engineer named Malik, rigged a small EMP device using parts they had salvaged from the remains of a destroyed Martian pod. The device worked flawlessly, sending the drone crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. The group moved quickly, dragging the drone's wreckage into the shadows to avoid detection. Inside the facility, the air was heavy with a strange metallic tang. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, emitting a low hum that resonated deep in the bones. The group split into pairs, each assigned a specific task. Dr. Harper and Malik headed to what appeared to be a central control room, while the protagonist and another member, a sharpshooter in the twilight, searched for anything that could shed light on the plans. What they found defied comprehension. Deep within the facility, the protagonist and Lila stumbled upon a chamber filled with large, translucent pods. Inside each pod was a human, their bodies suspended in a viscous, glowing liquid. The humans appeared to be in some kind of stasis, their expressions eerily serene. The sight sent a chill down the protagonist's spine. "What are they doing to them?" Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. The protagonist shook their head, unable to tear their eyes away from the grotesque scene. "I don't know," they replied. "But whatever it is, it can't be good." Meanwhile, Dr. Harper and Malik worked feverishly in the control room, hacking into the facility's systems. The alien interface was unlike anything they had ever seen, but Malik's background in engineering and Harper's scientific intuition proved invaluable. Together, they managed to access a treasure trove of data, including schematics of the facility and detailed records of Martian activities. "They're turning Earth into a network," Dr. Harper said, her voice tinged with horror. "Every spire, every facility, it's all connected. They're creating a planetary hive mind, and we're the raw material." Their success was short-lived. An alarm blared through the facility, the walls flashing with an ominous red light. The group's presence had been detected. Martian drones swarmed toward their location, their metallic bodies glinting menacingly in the flickering light. "We have to go," Malik shouted, grabbing the data drive they had managed to download. The group regrouped near the entrance, their escape plan unraveling as the Martians closed in. In the chaos, one of their members, a young scout named Sophie, was hit by a Martian weapon. Her body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The loss was devastating, but there was no time to grieve. The group fought their way out, using every weapon and explosive they had to hold off the Martians. The protagonist described the scene as a blur of light and sound, their body moving on instant Fighting Back. Chapter 6. The Human Machine. The days following the infiltration of the Martian facility were a whirlwind of activity. Back at the hideout, Dr. Harper and Malik worked tirelessly to analyze the data they had recovered. The protagonists documented their efforts, marveling at the determination of their makeshift team. "We've become something else," the protagonist wrote. "A strange fusion of scientists, soldiers, and scavengers. Maybe this is what humanity always does in the face of extinction. We adapt." The data revealed shocking details about the Martians' operations. The spires and facilities weren't just connected to each other. They were part of a vast neural network, a planetary supercomputer that controlled every aspect of the invasion. The glowing pods they had seen were a critical component of this system, converting human biomass into fuel for the network. "They're not just destroying us," Dr. Harper said during a tense meeting. "They're using us to power their invasion. Every human they take is another cog in their machine." The group's focus shifted to finding a way to disrupt the network. Malik believed that if they could overload one of the primary spires, it might cause a cascade failure throughout the system. But to do so, they would need to create a device capable of generating an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to cripple Martian technology. "We're talking about building a weapon from scratch," Malik explained, sketching out a rough design on a piece of salvaged paper. "It will take time and resources we don't have, but if we pull it off, it could turn the tide." The group set to work, scavenging materials from abandoned towns and dismantled Martian drones. Every trip outside the hideout was a risk, but the promise of striking back kept them going. The protagonist described these missions in vivid detail, capturing the tension of navigating through hostile territory and the exhilaration of returning with vital components. One such mission nearly ended in disaster. The group had ventured into a desolated city, hoping to salvage high-capacity batteries from a ruined hospital. As they worked, the ground began to tremble, and a deafening roar echoed through the streets. The Martian war machine, larger and more advanced than anything they had seen before, emerged from the road. The creature was a biomechanical colossus, its massive limbs bristling with weapons. The group scattered as it unleashed the barrage of heat rays, the beams carving through concrete like paper. The protagonist and Malik took cover in a collapsed building, their breaths ride as they watched the war machine methodically search for them. "We're not getting out of this one," Malik muttered, clutching a crude EMP grenade they had crafted. "Unless we make it count." Against all odds, Malik managed to disable the war machine with the grenade, the blast short-circuiting its systems long enough for the group to escape. The victory came at a steep cost, however. Several members of the team were injured, and their supplies were nearly depleted. Back at the hideout, the mood was grim but determined. The encounter had underscored the Martians' relentless power, but it had also proven that they could be fought. The protagonist reflected on the resilience of their group, marveling at how far they had come. "We're not the same people we were when this started," they wrote. "We've been forged in fire, remade by necessity. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, we're fighting to win." The construction of the EMP device became the group's singular focus. Dr. Harper and Malik worked day and night, piecing together the complex circuitry and fine-tuning the design. The rest of the group supported them however they could, gathering materials, keeping watch, and providing whatever help was needed. As the device neared completion, the group began to plan their next move. The data from the Martian facility had revealed the location of a key spire, one that served as a central hub for the network. It was heavily guarded, but if they could reach it and deploy the EMP, it might cripple the Martians' operations long enough for humanity to regroup. The chapter ends with the group standing around a completed EMP device, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. The protagonist's final entry captures the gravity of the moment. "This is it. Everything we've done, everything we sacrificed, has led to this moment. We're about to strike a blow that could change everything." The within it, suffered an excruciating death as their lungs filled with the corrosive vapor. The fog didn't just kill, it lingered, creating vast, uninhabitable zones that cut off survivors from one another. The protagonist documented the first encounter with the fog in chilling detail. The group had ventured out to scout a potential route to the central spire when they saw it in the distance. A thick, roiling mass of haze creeping through a valley, swallowing the world in silence. It moved like it was alive, the protagonist wrote, not fast, but deliberate, as if it knew there was nowhere to run. The trees bowed under its weight, their leaves crumbling into ash. Even from a distance, we could feel its heat, smell its stench. It was death made visible. The group retreated quickly, barely escaping as the fog began to spill into the hills. Back at the hideout, Dr. Harper examined a sample of the fog, a risky endeavor that required scavenging specialized equipment from a ruined research lab. Her findings were grim. It's a biochemical weapon, she explained, her voice heavy with exhaustion. A combination of corrosive agents and nanotechnology. The fog breaks down organic material at a molecular level, while the nanobots ensure it lingers and spreads. It's designed to erase life itself. Despite the horror of this new threat, the group's resolve only hardened. They couldn't let fear paralyze them, not when the stakes were this high. The protagonists captured the mood in their journey. The fog is their way of telling us that resistance is futile, but we've seen what they're afraid of. We've seen that they're not invincible. If they think this will break us, they're wrong. The journey to the central spire was harrowing. The group had to navigate areas shrouded in fog, relying on improvised protective gear and sheer willpower to press forward. The protagonist described the surreal, apocalyptic landscape they traversed. Fields of ash where forests once stood. Rivers reduced to stagnant pools of sludge. Entire towns entombed in the fog's suffocating embrace. Along the way, they encountered other survivors, many of whom had been displaced by the fog. Some joined the group, bringing valuable skills and knowledge. Others simply shared their stories before disappearing back into the wilderness. These encounters reminded the protagonist of humanity's capacity to break resilience and despair. Everyone we knew faced the weight of this war and they wrote. Some have given up, others cling to hope with everything they have. We're all fighting in our own way, even if it doesn't always look like it. When the group finally reached the outskirts of the central spire, they were all struck by its scale. The structure towered into the sky, its surface aligned with shifting patterns of light and energy. The air buzzed with an almost electric intensity, and the ground beneath their feet felt warm and unnatural. Dr. Harper studied the spire through binoculars, her expression a mix of fascination and dread. This is it, she said. The nerve center of their network. If we take this out, we'll hit them where it hurts. The group spent the next several hours preparing for their assault. They knew this would be their most dangerous mission yet, and possibly their last. The EMP device was their only weapon against the Martians' technology. Deploying it would require getting dangerously close to the spire. As night fell, the group made their move. The protagonist's account of the assault was fragmented and chaotic, reflecting the intensity of the battle. Martian drones descended on them in waves, their heat rays cutting through the darkness. The group fought back with everything they had, their crude weapons and explosives a stark contrast to the Martians' advanced technology. Amid the chaos, Malik carried the EMP device toward the spire. The protagonist followed close behind, providing cover fire and documenting the moment with a shaky hand. Every step felt like a lifetime, they wrote. The air was thick with smoke and ash, and the ground trembled with each explosion. But we kept moving. We had to. When they reached the base of the spire, Malik activated the device. The EMP emitted a blinding pulse of light, Survivors reported sporadic malfunctions in the drones and spires, moments where the Martians seemed disoriented and vulnerable. These glimpses of weakness spurred new strategies among resistance groups across the globe. The protagonist's journal captured the cautious optimism of the moment. For the first time, the Martians looked fallible. It's not much, but it's enough. Enough to remind us that they can bleed. Dr. Harper and Malik's analysis of the recovered Martian data revealed more crucial insights. The spires, they theorized, acted as nodes in a larger network. Disrupting one spire created localized chaos, but dismantling multiple nodes simultaneously could collapse the entire system. To achieve this, resistance groups would need to coordinate their attacks on an unprecedented scale. Communication became the resistance's primary challenge. With global networks still fractured, messages were carried by couriers, encoded in scavenged satellites, or broadcast on shortwave radios. The protagonist took on the role of a messenger, traveling between survivor groups to share the plan and rally support. The journey was fraught with danger. Martian patrols were relentless, and the death fog continued to spread, cutting off vital routes and isolating communities. The protagonist's encounters during this time revealed both the best and worst of humanity. In one town, they found a group of survivors who had turned to looting and betrayal to survive. In another, they discovered a hidden enclave of scientists working tirelessly to develop new weapons and strategies. Everywhere I go, I see the same thing: the protagonist will. People fighting to survive, to protect what little they have left. Some do it with kindness, others with cruelty, but all of them remind me of what we're fighting for. The protagonist's efforts bore fruit. Resistance groups from across the region began to converge, pooling their resources and knowledge. The hideout, once a small outpost, became a bustling hub of activity. Engineers built weapons, medics tended to the wounded, and scouts mapped out the locations of Martian spires. The Resistance's first coordinated attack was a resounding success. Using the EMP technology refined by Malik and Dr. Harper, they targeted 3 spires in quick succession. The strikes caused widespread chaos among the Martians. Their drones followed in the sky and their movements were survivors seized the opportunity to reclaim territory, dismantling Martian machinery and salvaging valuable resources. The protagonist's account of the attacks captured the exhilaration of the moment. We're not just surviving anymore, we're fighting back. For the first time, it feels like we have the upper hand. The Martians aren't invincible. They can be beaten, and we're the ones to do it. But the victories came at a cost. The Martians responded with brutal efficiency, deploying new weapons and intensifying their attacks. The death fog spread faster, and their war machines grew more advanced. The resistance suffered heavy losses, and the toll on morale was palpable. The protagonist's journal entries from this time reflected the growing strain. Every step forward feels like it costs us a piece of our soul. We lose people every day, and the weight of those losses is crushing. But we can't stop. Not now. Not when we're this close. Despite the hardships, the resistance pressed on. They began to experiment with new tactics, using their knowledge of the Martians' hive mind against them. By studying the patterns of the spire's energy pulses, they discovered ways to disrupt Martian communication temporarily, creating openings for surgical strikes. Dr. Harper's research yielded another breakthrough. She identified a microbial compound that could weaken the Martians' organic components without harming humans. The discovery offered a new weapon in the fight, one that could tip the scales further in humanity's favor. The chapter ends with the resistance preparing for their most ambitious operation yet: a coordinated assault on the largest concentration of spires. The plan is risky, requiring precise timing and fighters deployed EMP devices at key spires, triggering synchronous pulses that disrupted the Martian's network. The spires flickered and dimmed, their once mighty energy beams faltering. For the first time, the Martians appeared vulnerable. The protagonist team targeted a spire on the outskirts of the network, using explosives to breach its outer shell. Inside, they encountered the now familiar mix of organic and mechanical components. Dr. Harper worked quickly, deploying the microbial compound she had developed to weaken the spire's core. The results were immediate and dramatic. The spire's pulsating light dimmed to a dull glow, and the drones protecting it collapsed, their movements erratic before ceasing altogether. "It's working," Dr. Harper whispered, her voice a mix of relief and awe. "We're finally turning the tide." But the Martians were far from defeated. As the resistance dismantled spire after spire, the Martians adapted. New drones, faster and more lethal, emerged from hidden facilities. The death fog thickened around the remaining spires, creating impenetrable barriers that forced the resistance to rethink their strategies. The protagonist's journal entries from this time reflected both hope and despair. Every victory feels like a step forward, but the Martians keep finding ways to push us back. They're like a cornered animal, desperate, dangerous, and unpredictable. We can't afford to stop now, but every step costs us more than we can bear. The Resistance's biggest challenge came when the Martians launched a counterattack on their primary base. The battle was brutal, with drones and war machines overwhelming the defenses. Many fighters were lost, and the hideout, a symbol of hope for so many, was destroyed. The survivors retreated to a smaller, more isolated location, their numbers dwindling but their determination intact. Amid the chaos, the protagonist discovered an encrypted message buried within the Martian data they had recovered. With Malik's help, it decoded the message and uncovered a shocking revelation. The Martians were not acting out of malice or conquest. Their invasion was a desperate attempt to escape their own dying planet. Mars, it seemed, had become uninhabitable, and Earth was their last hope for survival. This revelation shook the group to its core. Dr. Harper, ever the protagonist, and living structures. They tried to survive, just like us, but that doesn't change what we've done, or what we have to do. If we don't stop them, there won't be anything left for either of us. The final phase of the Resistance's plan centered on the Martian's central hub, a massive structure that dwarfed the spires they had encountered so far. Located deep within a region shrouded by the densest death fog, the hub was both the heart of the Martian network and their primary stronghold. Reaching it would require an all-out assault, with every remaining Resistance fighter putting their life on the line. The chapter ends with the protagonist leading a team into the fog, their path illuminated by the faint glow of the Martian hub in the distance. Their final journal entry captures the weight of the moment. "We know what's waiting for us in that fog. We know the odds, and we know the cost. But we also know what's at stake. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about taking back our world. If this is the end, we're going out fighting." Chapter 10. Reclamation. The march toward the Martian hub was unlike anything the Resistance had faced before. Every inch of ground was contested, every breath a struggle against the choking death fog. The survivors moved as one, their faces hardened by the losses they had endured and the knowledge that this mission would likely be their last. The protagonist's journal described the eerie silence of the fog-shrouded landscape. "The world feels like it's holding its breath," they wrote. protagonist's account of the battle captures the desperation of the moment. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched, but we kept fighting. Not because we thought we could win, but because we knew we couldn't afford to lose. Inside the hub, the air was thick with heat and the hum of machinery. The team moved quickly, guided by Dr. Harper's knowledge of Martian systems. They encountered more of the translucent pods they had seen in previous facilities, each one containing a human suspended in stasis. The sight was a grim reminder of what was at stake. "This is what they've been building toward," Dr. Harper said, her voice tight with anger. "A planet-wide factory, using us as fuel. We have to shut it down." Reaching the hub's core required navigating a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more alien than the last. The walls seemed alive, shifting and pulsing as if responding to their presence. The team encountered several Martian defenders. Their movements were erratic, their coordination disrupted by the earlier EMP strikes. Even so, the resistance suffered losses. By the time they reached the core, only a handful of fighters remained. The core was a massive, pulsating sphere suspended in the center of a vast chamber. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns of light, and its energy filled the room with a low resonant hum. Dr. Harper set to work immediately, preparing the EMP device for deployment. The others formed a defensive perimeter, fending off waves of Martian drones that poured into the chamber. The protagonist described the final moments in vivid detail. The room was chaos. Heat rays cut through the air, and the walls trembled with each explosion. I could barely hear my own thoughts over the noise, but I knew this was it. Everything we had done, everything we had sacrificed, had led to this moment. As the EMP device activated, the sphere began to pulse erratically. The light patterns on its surface broke apart, and the hum grew louder, reaching a deafening crescendo before abruptly cutting off. The Martian drones collapsed, their bodies clattering to the floor like broken toys. The core dimmed, its once vibrant energy reduced to a faint glow. The resistance had won. The Martian network was offline, and their forces were invisible. But the cost had been staggering. Of the team that had entered the hub, only a few emerged. The protagonist's journey entry from that day captured the bittersweet nature of their victory. We did it. We stopped them. But at what cost? The world we saved is barely recognizable, and the people we lost can never be replaced. Victory doesn't feel like a triumph. It feels like survival, and now we have to figure out what comes next. In the days that followed, the death fog began to dissipate, and the remaining Martian forces scattered. Survivors emerged from hiding, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. The resistance began the long, arduous process of rebuilding, knowing that their victory was only the first step in reclaiming their world. The chapter ends with the protagonist standing on a hill overlooking the ruins of the Martian hub. The sky, once choked with fog, is beginning to clear, revealing the faint glimmer of stars. Their final words capture the fragile hope of the moment. The war is over, but the fight isn't. We've taken back our world, but it's up to us to make it worth saving. This isn't the end, it's a new beginning. Chapter 11. The Last Message. In the weeks following the destruction of the Martian hub, Earth entered a tenuous period of recovery. The Martians, once a seemingly unstoppable force, were now scattered and disorganized. Their drones lay inert, their spires darkened, and the death fog, once an omnipresent threat, dissipated into the atmosphere. For the first time in years, humanity began to see the possibility of a future. The protagonist's journal entries from this time reflected a mix of relief and unease. The war is over, The message ended with a plea, voiced in a language now understood through the decryption process. To those who find this, we did not come to destroy, we came to survive. But in our desperation, we became the destroyers. Learn from our mistakes. Do not follow our path. The protagonist's journal captured the weight of this revelation. They were us, they wrote. They made the same mistakes we've been making, and in their desperation, they lost everything. If we don't change, we'll end up just like them. The message sparked a global conversation. As survivors gathered to rebuild their communities, the Martian story became a cautionary tale. Leaders and thinkers from across the world began to grapple with the implications, recognizing the need for a new way forward. The scars left by the invasion served as a stark reminder of humanity's own vulnerabilities. But not everyone agreed on the path ahead. Some saw the Martian state as a warning against technological advancement, advocating for a return to simpler ways of life. Others believed that humanity could strike a balance, using technology responsibly to heal the planet and prevent future catastrophes. The debates were passionate, sometimes divisive, but they marked the beginning of a global reckoning. The protagonists, ever the observer, found themselves at the center of these discussions. Their writings and first-hand accounts of the war became widely shared, sparking both hope and reflection. The Martians came here to survive, they wrote, and in their failure, they've given us a chance to do more than survive. They've given us a chance to build something better. The chapter closes with a poignant scene. The protagonists, Dr. Harper, Malik, and a handful of survivors gather at the edge of a Martian spire, its once brilliant surface now dull and lifeless. They plant a small tree at its base, a symbol of renewal and hope. As they stand together, the sun sets on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape. This is where it starts, the protagonist writes. Not with war or destruction, but with faith. The Martians taught us what we needed to learn. Now it's up to us to make sure we don't forget. Chapter 12. Genesis of the New Earth. The years that followed the Martian invasion were marked by profound change. Humanity, scared but unbroken, began the arduous process of rebuilding. Cities were reconstructed, ecosystems restored, and communities reconnected. But the world that emerged from the ashes was not the same as the one that had been lost. In the wake of the war, a new global coalition was formed, comprised of leaders, scientists, and citizens from every corner of the planet. Its mission was clear: to ensure that humanity never repeated the mistakes that had led to the Martians' downfall. Policies were enacted to protect the environment, regulate technology, and promote cooperation over competition. The protagonists played a key role in these efforts. Their writings, once confined to a journal, became a beacon of hope and guidance for those striving to rebuild. They traveled the world, sharing stories of the resistance and the lessons learned from the Martians' message. We're all part of this, they wrote. Every action we take, every choice we make, shapes the world we leave behind. Dr. Harper and Malik continued their work as well, using their knowledge of Martian technology to advance sustainable energy and medical science. The microbial compound they had developed during the war became a cornerstone of ecological restoration efforts, helping to heal the planet's damaged ecosystems. But progress was not without its challenges. The scars of the invasion ran deep, and rebuilding trust among nations took time. Conflicts occasionally flared, and old habits proved difficult to break.